So I'm going to go up here to this cog here and I'm going to left click on it. And that opens up my preferences. I'm not going to discuss every setting in the preferences. I'm going to focus on the settings that I check or settings that I think are important to be aware of before you start editing. So we'll start off on the general tab. Over here to the left, we got the maximum undo levels. So this tells you how many times you can just click on undo. And this is important to know because the more undo levels you select, the more strain you're going to put on your PC. All right, so I always leave it at 50, so I would leave it there if I were you. Next, we got our audio channels, and audio channels can be stereo, or if you're using a raw file that has 5.1 surround, then you can select 5.1 surround. Even if you do have a 5.1 surround file, you can still choose stereo, and if you choose stereo, it'll just mix it down to a stereo file. Now, a very important setting here is your timeline frame rate. So the timeline frame rate is the frame rate of your project. So you have several settings on here. You have 24, 25, 30, 50, and 60 frames per second. If you're going to be exporting your project to 24 frames per second, then you should use the 24 frames per second timeline. Okay. Now, if you use something like 30 or 60 frames per second for NTSC, you will then have an option here for the drop frame time code. And that's because in your NTSC regions, it's not really 30 frames per second. So there could be some drop frames. So if that's the case, then you want to choose yes for a drop frame time code. Now, since I'm going to leave mine at 24, I don't need to worry about that. Then we have show sound waveform in timeline. If you want to be able to see your waveform for files that have audio, then you want to make sure that this is checked. Enable shadow files on high resolution videos. So if you have full HD or 4K or 2K or higher, really full HD or higher videos, then you can enable shadow files. And what shadow files do is they create a lower resolution file for you to use while you're editing. And that way it saves some of the processing power of your PC because you're not using the original high resolution file for your editing. So when you choose this, you can choose your set shadow file resolution. You can have 1080p, 720p, or standard res, which is 480. I'm going to leave mine at 1280 by 720. And then you have your auto delete temporary files every however many days. So the shadow files that are created create temporary files. So you can choose how long you want to keep those files on your PC here. And then if you want to manually delete those files, you can just click on manually delete. And it'll bring up those files and you can choose them one by one. You can select all, and then you can delete these temporary shadow files off of your PC. And that's all I got under the general tab. So let's jump to the editing tab. So under the editing tab, the first thing that I make sure is set up is the default transition behavior. So you can choose cross or you can choose overlap. Cross just basically means that when your transition hits, they cross right in the middle. And then overlap means that one of the clips is going to overlap the other clip with the transition. I like cross, so I'm going to leave it on cross. And then the next thing that I want to talk about is the return to clip movie beginning after preview. So whenever you play a clip or a movie, usually you'll notice that the playhead jumps back to the beginning of that clip if you have it set to clip, or the beginning of the movie if you're at the end of the movie. So if you don't want the playhead to jump back to the beginning, you might want to uncheck this. I'll leave mine checked. And then the next thing on here that I like to make sure it's set is enable snap to clips in timeline. So I like to make sure that my clips, when they get close to each other, they snap and lock into place right next to each other. So I leave that one enabled. And then for duration, this is a duration of several things. So I always make sure that I set this up how I want. it sets the default for any of these items that you place on the timeline. So if I place an image on the timeline, I have it set to 5 seconds. So anytime I place a picture on the timeline, it's going to be 5 seconds. Transitions I have set to 1 second. Titles I have set to 10. So you got so on and so on and so on. So all of these are defaults that I make sure are set to whatever my preference is. And then I have my keyboard hotkeys. So you can customize these hotkeys. If you click on customize, then you can select the different hotkeys for different things. If I want to change for create new project, right now it's Control N, I can change it to something else. So I can go through here and set up the hotkeys for several different commands, however I want. And that's it for the edit tab. So let's jump to the file tab. So under file, just a few things I wanted to touch on. The first one is the import folder. So I can select the default location where I want to import my assets from. If I don't like this location, I can just click on browse, and then I can go to the location where I want to go to import file from. Same thing for exporting files. I can go ahead and select where I want to export files to when I produce them. I leave all the rest of the stuff on the default. So I'm good with that. Let's jump to the display tab. So the first thing on here is the preview quality. So when I'm looking at a file in the preview window, I want to set up my quality for that. So right now I have mine set up to HD preview resolution. The higher the resolution, the more strain you're going to put on your resources, the more strain on your PC, because it's working harder to create the higher resolution, higher quality file. And if you notice that your PC is slow or laggy, you might want to move the preview down to a low preview resolution to help out with that. Keep in mind, if you do that, your preview is going to look pixelated or blocky or whatever you want to call it. It's going to look blurry. It's not going to look as good, but it doesn't matter, because when you produce your video, it's still going to be the high quality resolution that you select for your produce settings. Then you have your preview mode. So you have real-time preview, and then you have non-real-time preview. So real-time preview, once again, you're going to get the real-time playback of your file along with audio with that file. If you choose non-real-time preview, then it's going to use less of your computer's resources, and it's going to play it back not in real time, and you're not going to get the audio. It's going to mute your audio when it plays it. So if you don't mind the audio being muted, but you want to try to make sure your editing is smoother, you can change it to non-real-time preview. And then I have this checked here, snap to reference lines. So whenever you have a clip on the timeline and you're looking at it in the preview, if I move it left, right, up, down, it'll snap back into place if I move it close to the original regular preview window setting. And then you have your TV safe zone. I have this off right now, but sometimes I turn it on if I'm using like subtitles or titles, or if I'm adding any type of graphics to the lower corners of the screen. And the reason why I do that is because I want to make sure that if it's being viewed on a TV, that it's within the safe zone. So I use that from time to time. And in grid lines, sometimes I use that to make sure that things are in, if I'm using like the rule of thirds, of course, and I have a 3x3 grid, then I want to make sure that the items, if I'm moving things around, position on the screen, if I'm scaling them up and moving them, I may want to make sure that I'm following the rule of thirds and I have the item on the line where I need it. So I can use grid lines for that. Dual preview. If you got dual monitors, you can use it. I usually leave mine off because I make a lot of tutorials, and if I do use it, then I'll just drag it over to the other monitor. And that's really it for the display screen. So next, let's talk about hardware acceleration. So here we have enable NVIDIA CUDA technology. So if you have a NVIDIA card or NVIDIA graphics card, then you can enable that. If you want to speed up your render for any effects that you're adding to your videos. And then you have enable hardware decoding. Of course, that's for decoding files. So next we'll go down to the project tab. Automatically load sample clips when Power Director opens. So I don't mind it bringing these sample clips in every time. But if you don't want to see these sample clips anymore, like the same clips over and over with the balloon and the beach and all this stuff, then you can uncheck this and those sample clips will not load. It'll just load with the empty library. And then you have your autosave project. So I have it set to autosave every 10 minutes. You can go anywhere from 2 minutes to 120 minutes. Once again, the more frequently you do it, the more strain is going to put on your PC. And then you have the location where the save files are at. You can change this if you want to a different location. Or if you want to delete all those save files off of your PC, this will show you where they're at. And you can go there and delete them on your own manually. So then we have the Produce tab. And the only thing that I have checked on here is to reduce video noise when using MPEG 1, MPEG 2, and H.264 software encoders. So then we have the Capture tab. And I leave all this stuff on the default settings here. So then we have the Confirmation tab. And there's a few things I want to touch on the Confirmation tab. So one of the things that I have on here is I have this unchecked. Always prompt me when I import high definition video into the library. I'm always using HD or higher video, so I don't want to be prompted every time I import the stuff into the library. If you do, you can leave that setting there if you wish. Always enter timeline mode at startup. So some people have this checked because you just want it to go directly to the timeline mode. You don't want that splash screen to show up asking you which mode you want to use. Then if you don't want that screen to pop up, you can just check this and it'll always jump right to the timeline mode. And then always prompt me when entering non-real-time preview mode. I have this one checked. If I, for some reason by mistake, go into non-real-time preview mode, I want this prompt to tell me, hey Malik, you're going into non-real-time preview mode. Are you sure you want to do that? Or, hey, just want to let you know because your audio is about to be muted. So I have this checked just in case I click on something by mistake and put myself in a non-real-time preview mode. And then always prompt me before pasting keyframe attributes. I have this checked. So if I want to copy some PIP designer settings that I put on one clip and paste them into another clip, then when I hit paste, I get this pop-up saying, hey, you're about to change the keyframe attributes that are in this clip right now and add these other keyframe attributes to it. So in case I click on the wrong clip and it's like, hey, wow, I didn't want to change those keyframe attributes. Hold on, maybe I'm on the wrong clip. Then I get a prompt telling me that I'm about to change those. And then the last one that I wanted to talk about here is always prompt me about merging media files when opening an existing project. When I have a project open and I open a new project, I want to know, hey, I want the option to merge or not merge the files from the current project with the project that I'm opening. And this prompt gives me that option to either merge the clips or not. So I like to keep this checked. We're going to talk about importing media. The first thing that I'll always do is I create a folder somewhere on my internal hard drive that has a copy of all the files I'm going to use in the project. Not the original files, a copy of the files. All right. So if I go here to File Explorer, I can go to the location here where I have all the files that I want to use in this project. All right. It helps me to organize things, keep things clean. And then I don't have to worry about messing up the original file because I'm using the copies of those original files as well. The next thing that I like to do is remove all of the media that's in the library, all of these sample files. So to do that, I'm going to go up here to the library menu. I'm going to left click on that. And then I'm going to go down here to empty the library. If you don't want the sample files to show up when you open the program, you can edit that setting in your preferences. The next thing that I like to do is save my project and give it a name. So the next thing I do is I go to File, Save Project As. I go to a location where I want to save my project. Let's just say I save it here with all of these thingies. And I give it a name. And I'm going to call this Color Match Time 2. And I'll click on Save. Now I'm done with all of that. I can start importing. So there's a few different ways I can do that. If I right click here in the library, I get a menu with a few options. The first one is import media files. And this allows you to import one or multiple files at a time. Then you have import a media folder. And this option allows you to import an entire folder. So you can't do individual files or multiple files. You just have to do the whole folder with this option. And then the last import option on here is import library. Now to import a library, you need to export an existing library first. So if I had a bunch of files in the library and I wanted to export them into a file that I can use to open up those files in another library, then I would select export library. And then when it's time to import them, I would select import library. So I'm going to click on import library. And you see here, I have a PDL file. It's a Power Director library file. And this contains shortcuts to the original clips that I used when I first created this library. So if I moved any of those files, it won't be able to find them because this is not the actual files. It's just links to where those files are. So if I click on this and select open, it's going to look for those files and it says, oh, you moved that one or deleted it or renamed it or something. So I don't know where that is. So I'm just going to click on ignore. And anything that it can't find anymore, I'm just going to click on ignore. If you ever have a bunch of files in there and you want to move them to a shortcut and you know you're not going to move those files, you can export that library and then you can import that library using this function. So I'm going to remove these files again. And let's talk about the other options. So if I right click, I have import media files. So if I select that, then I can go back to this color match folder and I can select files one by one, or I can left click a clip or a file. I can hold down my control key and then I can select another one to select multiple files. So if I only wanted to import these 4 files, I can now click on open and it'll bring those 4 files in. So I'll click on open and it brought in those 4 files and left the other 2 files out. I'm going to remove these again. And then the last option is to import a folder. This time, instead of right clicking in the library, I'm going to go here to the import media icon. And if I click on that, I get the same options for importing here. The only one I don't get is to import a library. This time, if I select import a media folder, I can left click on that. And I can go find that folder I want. So I'm going to left click on color match and then I'll select folder. And it's going to bring in all the files that were in that folder. And now I can edit with these files. One of the first things I do in my workflow is I rename the tracks. So in order to rename your editing tracks, you place your cursor over the line that's in between the track icons and the timeline tracks until you see a line with 2 arrows. Hold down your left mouse and then drag this out to the side. And then you see you can name your track. So this is really helpful because it allows you to easily identify what types of assets are on each track. So for instance, I might call this one my intro track. and I might call this the intro audio track, and then I might call the next one the Malik track because it has me on it or whatever. It just really helps me be able to identify what assets are on each track. And as I go and I add assets, I can go here and I can update the track names. The next thing I like to do is make sure that I have my hotkeys set up for the hotkeys that I create. So what I do at this point is I press Alt-H on my keyboard, and it brings up the keyboard hotkeys. So here I have it set to the Power Director default, and basically I can go through and change all of these different options for all of these different types of settings and different types of hotkeys. And when I'm done doing that, I can hit Save As. And after I hit Save As, I'm allowed to give a name to my hotkey set. And then I click on OK. And then what happens there is under this hotkey set area, if I click on this drop down, I will have additional sets. And the set that I customized and created will be listed here. And this way, it'll be the hotkeys that I want for all of my effects. So I'm going to click on Cancel here. Now, the next thing we want to do is start to pull some files down into our timeline. But before I do that, I want to show you guys how to sort through your assets. Because if you have a lot of different assets here, let's say I have right now 11 assets here in the library. If I just want to see, like, let's say I have 100 or I have 200, it might be a lot for me to take in. So I might need to sort this information so that I can find things quicker. So if I just wanted to see the audio, then I would remove images and remove videos. And now all I see is audio, and I can siphon through here and pick the audio that I want and drag it into the timeline. Okay. Same thing for pictures. If I just wanted to see pictures, I could do that. I just wanted to see video, I could do that. And then if I want to see everything, I can bring everything up. So this is a good way for me to be able to sort through the library and get to the types of assets I want quicker. Now that I've showed you that, what we do next is we drag clips to the timeline. Dragging a clip to the timeline allows us to edit it. So I can drag one clip at a time by just left clicking on a clip, dragging it down into the timeline where I want it to be. Or I could drag in multiple clips by doing a left click on my mouse, holding down my control key, and then selecting additional clips. So now if I drag this down, it'll drag all 3 of those clips down into the timeline. You can also perform what's called ripple editing by dragging clips on top of one another in a timeline. So let's say I grabbed this clip and I dragged it down here on top of this other clip. Now I'm going to get some options. I could just overwrite this clip, and if I choose that, it's just going to add that clip and it's going to remove the other clip that was there, and now it's really right there in the middle. The other option I have on here is to insert. If I choose insert, it adds it, it pushes over everything that was after it. The next option I have here is insert and move all clips. So if I choose this one, it's going to move all the clips on all of the timelines so that everything stays in sync. And then the last option I have on here is replace. If I click on replace, it's going to put it there and just take out the other clip that was there before. Now, if we want to see more of these clips, we can easily stretch out our timeline, and this will help us be able to see more of the clips so we can do more precise editing, frame by frame editing, things like that. So I'll just place my cursor over the timeline where we have the numbers until I see a little clock and the arrows. Hold down my left mouse and I can drag this out and everything gets larger, and now I can see the different frames a lot clearer. Or if I want to, I can say, hey, I want everything to just fit exactly on the timeline. And I can click on the view entire movie button. And now everything fits from left to right on the screen. There's no clips after that on the timeline. So when it comes to previewing or looking at your clip so that you can do your editing, you need to know how to use the buttons under your preview window. So the first button is the play button. And then there's also the option to press the space key on your keyboard, which I'm going to press now.
James Weems made.
And then you have your stop button, or you can press Control-7 to stop. Then you have your seek by buttons. So right now I have it set to frame. So if I press this, it'll go back one frame. Or I can press the comma key on my keyboard and it'll go back one frame. And then over here to the right of the seek button, I have my next frame. So I can press this to move forward a frame, or I can press the period key on my keyboard to move forward a frame. Now, the seek by button in the middle, it basically changes these two buttons to different options. So right now they're set to frame. If I press on this, I can change it to second, minute, chapter, or segment. So it gives you different options to utilize the seek by buttons. If I want to move forward a second, I would change it to that, a minute, and so on and so forth. Then to the right of that, we have our fast forward button. Or we can also press Control F to go fast forward. Then we have our snapshot button. So if you want to create a JPEG, if you press the snapshot button, what it does is it'll save a snapshot of the frame where the playhead is. And if you click on save, it'll add it to your library. And here you see it. And now I can drag it down into the timeline somewhere if I want. So if I wanted to like create a freeze frame or something, I might place it right where the playhead is and stretch it out. And now instead of looking like it's moving, it'll be just frozen at that point.
So if you're going to be heading out to Wisconsin, or you already live there and you want to check out some things to do, head on over to his channel, watch a couple of his videos, and if you're feeling what he's dealing, make sure you subscribe.
So basically I just created a freeze frame by doing a snapshot and placing that clip into the timeline. And then the next button on here I want to talk about is the undock button. So if I click on this, I undock the preview window, makes my library larger. I can move this to a different area. I can move it onto a different monitor. Could do whatever I want with it. And then we have here our dock button. So if I were to click on this, it'll dock it back where it was. So once you start editing, one of the things that you do is you remove unwanted parts of your video, and you can split or trim to do that. So let's say I wanted to split some video here. I can place my playhead where I want to remove the video, or for the section I want to remove. And then I can press the clip to make sure that that clip is the one selected. If I don't select this clip, it'll split everything on the timeline. All right. So now I can press the split the selected clip button. And now I have the part that I can remove. It's already highlighted blue. If it wasn't highlighted blue, you'd want to click on it to select it. And then I can click on the remove the selected clip button. And then I can choose to remove and leave gap. If I do that, there'll be a space there. So I don't want to do that. I have remove and fill gap. So if I do remove and fill gap, it'll remove it and it'll fill the gap for just that timeline track. Or I could choose remove, fill gap, and move all clips. And if I do this one, it'll move over all the clips on all tracks to keep everything in sync. And there you go. Now we can also trim clips. So if I trim the front of a clip, I can click on this clip, place my cursor here till I see 2 arrows, hold down my left mouse, and drag this over to trim off the part that I don't want. And when I let this go, it gives me options to just trim it. So if I just trim it, it'll leave a space there or a gap there. I can trim and move all clips, or I can trim and move clips, which will just move the clips on this timeline track, or I can trim and move all clips. So this time I'll do trim and move clips, and it'll just move the clips on this track. And there you go. Now we can also trim the end of a clip. So if I do the same thing, I have this clip selected. I'm gonna place my cursor here, left click, hold down my mouse, trim that, and I get the same options here. So if I were to pick trim only like I just did, it'll leave this gap here, but I could still remove this gap if I say, hey, I should have removed that gap. Now I want to. Well, all I need to do is place my cursor over the gap, click it with my right mouse, and I can choose to remove this gap and move the clips on the same track or move all clips. Another thing that a lot of people like to do with their videos is add titles to them. So I'm just going to give you a quick breakdown of how to bring those titles into your timeline. So the first thing I want to do is add a color board to add the title on top of that. So here for the media content, I'm going to change this to color boards. And it really doesn't matter which color you do. Let's say I want blue for some reason. And I'm going to leave my playhead here at the beginning of this. And I'm going to go to the title room. And I'm just going to drag this default title down to a track. You could drag it down to the title track if you want, which is down here. But you don't have to. You can actually put a title on any track. So let's say I add it here. And now the title is here over the blue color board, and I can stretch out the color board to make it match the length of the title. And then if I click on the title or double click it or go to designer, then I can change the wording and do all these beautiful things that I show you in my title editor video. So I'm going to hit cancel. And then there's also the option to just add your title over the video or over a picture. So instead of using a color board, you just drag your title down and place it underneath the video clip that you want it to overlay. And then you have a title over your video. Pretty simple stuff. So the last thing I want to talk about is applying transitions. So I'm going to go here to the transition room. And I'm going to stretch out my timeline here so I can see my transitions a little bit easier. So there's several different ways that you can apply a transition. You can left click on a transition that you want to use and drag it down to the timeline. You can place it on the end of a clip, the beginning of a clip, or you can place it over the end and the beginning of 2 clips like that. What happens then is it'll go ahead and fade it to the next one. You won't be able to see it now because it's just the same clip back to back. So it's not really going to show you anything for that fade. So don't really worry about it. As you see here, if I play it,
with video, YouTube,
you barely saw the fade happen. So the other option, and let me make this a little bit smaller here so we can see everything. You can barely see this little line here, which is the transition. So the other option I was talking about was clicking on the library menu, and then I can apply the transition to all videos. I can apply it by applying my favorite, by applying random transitions, applying fading transition, And then also I can apply random audio transitions to all of the audio clips. So if I, let's say, do the fading transition to all videos, I can choose prefix, which is at the beginning of a clip, postfix, which is at the end of a clip. You could do cross, which is right in the middle and none of the clips overlap, or I could do an overlap where the second clip overlaps the first clip. So I'm just going to do cross transition. Click on that. And you'll see now all of these have a little transition in between those clips. So we're good to go. So now let's wrap this up by talking about copying and pasting keyframe attributes. So if you add any type of keyframe attributes or effects to a clip, like on this one, you can see that it's zoomed in. This one is not zoomed in. So if I want to zoom in this clip like this one is, what I did on this one was I applied the PIP designer and I applied some scaling effects to bring it up. But instead of having to do that, click on this clip, go to PIP designer and do everything again, I could just click on the clip where I've applied the effect or the keyframes. I can right click on it, could choose copy keyframe attributes, and then I can click the clip that I want to paste them to. I can right click on it and select paste keyframe attributes. It'll give me a warning saying, hey, if you have any keyframes that you applied to this clip, they're all going to be removed and replaced by the new keyframes, and that's okay. And now you'll see that it jumps up. So now they're both zoomed in. Let me go through each way that I do color correction. So on this first clip right here, I'm going to left click on it to activate it. And then I'm going to go to Fix Enhance. First thing I'm going to do is go to white balance, and I'm going to check white balance. And then I want to go to white calibration. And I'm going to move my playhead to a position where I have something white on the scene. Now, what I'm holding on this part of the scene is a 18% gray card. One side of it is gray, and that's for exposure. And the other side of it is white for white balance. You don't have to use this if you don't want to, but if you have an 18% gray card, you can. Or if there's something white in the scene, you can do this as well. Now I'm going to go ahead and click on the calibrate button, which is the eyedropper. And it brings up the screen, and basically it says, here's the original and here's what it's going to look like calibrated. Use the eyedropper and you select a portion that is as close to white as possible. And this is white. This is the selected color. So I know that this is white. So I'm going to click on this. And you can see that there's a difference in the different clips now. So this one's closer to white than this one was. So I'm good to go with that. I'm going to click on OK. Now, I still don't think that it calibrated as well as it should have. So one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the color temperature down a bit to make it a bit cooler, closer to blue. So I'm good with this part now. So what I want to do next is fix my exposure, my highlights, shadows, things like that. So I'm going to go here to color adjustment. And now here I'm going to make a few changes. For brightness, I'm going to bring this up a bit. And saturation, I need to add more color to this because the clip is flat. And I want it to bring more color out in it. And for highlight healing, I'm going to move that up here. And then for shadows, let's go ahead and move that up. And that looks pretty good. So let's go ahead and look at this clip here compared to the second clip, which still has not been color corrected. Huge difference. You can see that this clip is a lot flatter. It's an actual C-Log profile. And this one now has brightness. The exposure is right. The white balance is right. There's more color. Looks a lot better. So that's one way to do color correction right inside of Power Director. So now I'm going to show you how to do some color correction using Color Director. So let's go to this clip here. I'm going to left click on it to activate it. I'm going to go to Fix Enhance. And this time I'm going to click on Color Director. Okay, so I'm going to go to white balance and I'm going to select the eyedropper tool. And once again, I'm going to click on something that's close as white that I can get. And that'll work there. Also bring my temperature down here a bit. And I'm going to move the tint here a little bit, and that looks a lot better. Then I'm going to go down to the tone section, and I'm going to bring my exposure up a bit. And under brightest, I'm going to bring that up. And the midtones, I want to bring those up as well. Get some more, bring up those midtones a little bit. Then I want to bring the darkness down here so that anything that's black, I want to bring it down a little bit. And now I want to bring some color back in. So for saturation under tinge, I want to bring that up to give me a little bit more color. And I think that looks really good. So I'm going to click on back. And now let's compare this clip, which I just did the color director on, to the last clip. And you see a big difference. And let's go ahead and compare it to the first clip as well. See how good I did at getting them close to one another. I did pretty good. So talk about the last way to do color correction. And this one will also be done using Color Director. So I'm gonna click on this clip, make sure I'm at Fix Enhance. And I'm gonna go back to Color Director. So this time I'm just going to use the color curves to change the highlights and the shadows. And usually there's a lot more that you need to do to get this correct, but I'm just going to show you that this can be used too to kind of give you a quicker way to do color correction. So I'm going to bring my highlights down and the shadows up here. And I think that's pretty good right there. And then you can add other things like saturation and other things to it. You can change the color temperature. You could do all the other things that I did or some of the other things, but this is just a quick way to kind of get your highlights and your shadows where you need them to be. I think that's pretty good. So then you can click on back. And that's a quick and dirty color correction there. Looks a lot different than the first clip that I brought in. Let me bring back in this first clip again, so you can see the difference. There's the original, and there's the one with the color curves. On the timeline, I have a video clip, which has audio, and I also have an audio clip. So either one of these can be used to go into Audio Director. As you can see here, if I click on the video, I get an Edit Audio button, and I have the option to go to Audio Director or Wave Director, and I get those same options if I click on the audio file. So I'm going to click on Edit Audio, and I'm going to go to Audio Director. So the audio file is now imported into the program. So the first thing that I want to do is add some compression to this audio, because I want to reduce the volume of any loud sounds in the video. So I'm going to make sure that I'm on the Edit tab. I'm going to go to the Adjustment section, and I'm going to click on Apply Effect. And then I'm going to click on Dynamic Range Control. And right now I'm going to focus on the compressor section. So the first thing I want to do is change the threshold, and the threshold is how loud the signal has to be before it adds compression and starts to lower the volume of the loud sounds. So I'm going to go at 15 dBs here. And then I'm going to change the ratio. And the ratio is how much compression is applied. So right now it's at a 1:1 ratio. I'm going to change it to 2.5 to 1. And then attack is how quickly the compressor starts to work. I'm going to change that to 7 milliseconds. And then release is how soon after the signal dips below the threshold that the compressor stops. And I'm going to leave that at 100. So we can preview this to see how it sounds if we want to. So I'm going to click on Apply. Now, what you can see down here is that it has applied this effect. And if I were to uncheck it, so pay attention to this area here, or even these two areas here, you'll see that when I uncheck it and remove the effect, that those spots go up. If I apply the effect back, they go down. Basically, it has reduced the loudness of those points in the video. So that's compression. That's what I needed done. Let's move on. The next thing that I want to do is add some warmth and clarity to my voice. So I'm going to, go to the equalizer and boost some things up here a bit. So we're still under the Edit tab, and we're still under Apply Effect, but now we're going to go to Equalizer. And I'm not going to use a preset. I'm going to click this drop down arrow, and I'm going to go to Custom. And then I'm going to click the cog here for the advanced options. And now the first thing I want to do is add some warmth to my voice. So works different for men than it does for women. So for men, to warm up your voice, you can move it anywhere from 3 to 5 decibels around the 180 to the 200 hertz mark. If you're a woman, you can raise it 3 to 5 decibels around the 400 hertz mark. So you can see the hertz up here at the top. And then of course you have your decibels here on the side, or you can type them in here at the bottom. So I don't have a 180 or a 200, so I'm just going to go to 250 hertz, which is here. And I'm going to type 3 and enter. And you see that it applies that change to it. Now, that's going to add more warmth to my voice. Now, I want to add more clarity. I want to improve the clarity of my voice. So for men, you want to go from 4 to 6 decibels around the 3000 hertz mark. And then for women, you want to do 4 to 6 decibels around the 4000 hertz mark. So unfortunately, once again, I don't have a 3000. I have a 4000 here. So I'm just going to go to the bottom of that spectrum and do a 4 here at the 4000 and hit enter. So we compressed it to bring it down, keep it down to 15 because we knew that we wanted to add that warmth and that clarity to it, that was going to raise it back up some. So doing the compressor first gives us some flexibility to do other things to improve on the sound later without peaking. And speaking of peaking, we need to take care of that now because we boosted our sound, the warmth and clarity. So there's a chance that maybe now there could be some things in our waveform that are peaking and causing distortion, and we don't want that. So let's take care of that next. I'm going to click on apply to go ahead and apply the changes I made to the equalizer. And so now you see both of these effects here. And if I uncheck equalizer, you see the difference in the waveform once again. So we're good to go with that. But now we need to take care of any type of peaking. So we want to apply a limiter. So to apply the limiter, there's two things we can do at this point. We can click on dynamic range control and it'll bring up the same controls we had before. Or we can come down here to where it says dynamic range control and we can click on this edit effect button. So I'm going to click on this edit effect button. And now I'm going to focus on the limiter. And the reason why I didn't do them both at the same time is because if I did it when I did the compressor, it would not take into effect the boost of the warmth and the improvement on the clarity. So I want to do it now since I've already done that other effect. So threshold here, I'm going to do 2.5. So what that means is that it's going to attenuate or lower anything that's stronger than that signal. So if anything is above that 2.5, it's going to bring it down. And all the rest of the settings mean the same thing. You got the ratio. I'm going to leave the ratio at a 1:1. Attack, which is how quickly the limiter starts to work. I'm going to make that a 7. And then release, I'm going to leave that at 100 again. And so now I'm going to click on apply. And if you had anything that was above that 2.5, it would have brought it down. So that way you're not going to have any peaking, distortion, or crazy noises in your video. So the next thing I want to do is some noise reduction. I record my videos in a room and I have a lot of things in place to try to cut down on background noise, but still happens. So I want to remove any background noise from this video. So the first thing that I want to do is I'm going to click on restore. So it's going to say, hey, before I go to restore, it needs to apply the changes I made to the working library file. I'll say yes. So now what I want to do is select a portion of the clip where it's just the background noise, just the ambience. And this should be good here because I know I'm not speaking here because the waveform is not large at this point. So I'm going to just select this by left clicking here within the grid, holding down my left mouse and dragging it across. And so now just this portion is selected. So this should be just background noise and no speaking. So now I'm going to come over here and select noise reduction. And then I'm going to select noise reduction again because I want to select the portion that I want the system to add noise reduction to, or the part of the audio that I want it to use as a sample of what I want removed. So now I'm going to click on next. And I'm going to use this smart analysis to identify a specific frequency range. And then I'm going to click on analyze. And basically it's just going to analyze that portion that I selected. I'm just going to leave these things as they are. And then if you preview, you're just going to preview the same section that you have selected. So I'm not going to worry about previewing it, but I'm going to click on next. And now it's going to say, select which range of the audio you want to apply the noise reduction to. So it analyzed this section and said, hey, I hear noise in here and I know what that noise is. Now, do you want me to remove that noise from just here, or from a different part of the clip, or from the whole clip? So I'm going to say, remove that noise that you captured here, but remove it from the whole clip. So now it covers the whole clip. And now I can preview it if I want to see how's everything going to sound once I remove that noise. But I'm just going to click on apply. And now that background noise has been removed. I'm going to click on back. And it says all modifications will be saved to the file when they're sent to PowerDirector. Do you want to save the changes? And I'm going to say yes. And now it's going to add the same clip back to PowerDirector with all of the adjustments and corrections that I made to the audio. So I'm on a Produce tab, and under the Produce tab, I'm on Standard 2D. I don't make 3D videos, I don't make videos for devices, and I don't upload videos online directly from the software. When I upload videos to YouTube, I create a file here using the standard 2D file of my choice, and then I go to YouTube or Facebook and I upload directly on their site. So that's how I get down. Underneath that, we got Intelligent SVRT. But we need to be focusing on the file formats. So I'm going to give you a breakdown of all these file formats, and then I'll tell you about the one that I use most. The first one that we got on here is AVI. So if you're looking for a file format with less compression that can be played on most devices and websites, and you don't mind standard definition, then AVI might be a good choice for you. It's an older format, but it's still used a lot of different places online, and you can see it all over the place because of its flexibility and compatibility. Next, we have MPEG 2. If you want to create a DVD, this is the file format for you. You can select some higher resolutions than standard def using this, but the standard definitions all the way up to 720, those are the MPEG 2 formats that you use for DVDs. Now, MPEG 2 has a low compression rate and high quality, which results in large file sizes. So if you're looking to save some time producing files and you want to save some space on your hard drive, then MPEG 2 may not be the right format for you. But if you got time to spare and plenty of hard drive space, and you're trying to save files that you want to put onto a DVD later, MPEG 2 is probably your option. Next, we got Windows Media. So Windows Media was, of course, made by Microsoft, and it's a format that was used to replace AVI. So the size of the WMV files makes them a popular format for streaming video over the internet. Also, because it's owned by Windows, if you're looking to play a video on an older version of an Office product, like you want to play a video on an older version of PowerPoint, then WMV is one of the few formats that's supported for that. So if you're looking to play your video on a wide variety of devices, the WMV format isn't really the best choice. But if you're looking for sticking to Windows or players that play Windows files or even older versions of Office, then WMV should be the way to go. Next, we got XAVCS. Now, this is a file format found on a lot of the Sony cameras. One of the popular cameras that it's on right now is the Sony A7S. This file format offers lower compression than formats like ProRes or DNx HD, but it creates files that are similar in quality to ProRes and DNx HD. So it's a great format for high quality files. Now, producing an XAVC file can cause some compatibility issues with other applications because some applications don't accept these type of files yet. So if you're looking for something for a high quality, like you want to broadcast some beautiful 4K footage on your TV or your projector, then rolling with the XAVCS format could be a great choice for you. Next, we got H.264, and this is one of the most common video codecs being used today. It is more efficient for compression than those MPEG-2 files, and it even delivers higher quality than those files. So if you want to create HD or higher resolution content for things like your Blu-ray disc or online video while minimizing the file size, this is a very reliable option for that. Next, we got H.265 HEVC. Now, this is the successor to H.264, and it offers even better compression than H.264. So the image quality and smaller file size makes it one of the favorites for producing 4K files. A lot of people use this for 4K. If you want that 4K love, that 4K beauty in a small package that's manageable, and you're willing to test the compatibility waters, then H.265 is your best bet. And those are all of the file formats that you need to know about. Now, which one do I use? Well, I use H.264 the most. The image quality is fantastic, and the compression helps to keep down the file size. So this is the one that I use. I also use the MP4 file extension when I'm using this. And I usually will go with something like 1920 by 1080, 24p. Of course, I do United States NTSC because that's where I'm at. That's the region that I live in. Once I get all this stuff done, just go ahead and choose the folder that we want to export to. Give our file a name here. Choose the folder, click save. And then when we're done, we click start and produce away. Hope you learned something new today.